Hello and welcome to another PirateMonkE Pitches. So this is on the Last Ronin, the Lost Years. And I did kind of cover a little bit of what I would have done in my review for the final issue, which came out earlier today. But I figured, you know what? I kind of wanted to expand upon it just a little bit more. So in the original run, Mikey realizes that all of his family members and friends are dead. He runs away. He thinks about committing suicide, but then decides against it. And then he decides to just live out on the outskirts of this village. The village ends up getting destroyed by this gang that belonged to this guy named the Death Worm. And Mikey spends the rest of the series trying to find a Death Worm. And along the way, he meets different trainers that give him new techniques for him to use. He finally confronts the Death Worm, and he uses those techniques. I want to say uses in like quotation marks. I didn't really care for the way that it was used, and I feel like all that training was kind of pointless, but that's just my own personal belief. But he uses those trainings, defeats the Death Worm, the end. And I would have liked if the series had gone in a completely different direction. So what I would have liked instead, and this is going to be my pitch, is Mikey realizes that his family, his friends, they're all dead. And of course, he's suffering from survivor's guilt, PTSD, depression, suicidal ideation. He's at his weakest point, the lowest of the low that he can ever get. And he's staying at this village, and he's just trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, everyone that I know and love is gone. I'm a monster. Like, I'm immune. I can't live amongst regular people. Like, I'm all alone. And the village doesn't see him that way. They take him in, they treat him like one of their own, and he starts to slowly build himself back up a little bit. He's still suffering from problems, but he's a little bit better than where he was. And then the village gets destroyed. Maybe Mikey is out one day gardening or hunting for the village or something. When he comes back, the city's all burned, and it's because of the Death Worm's men. And so Mikey goes on this journey where he's going to try to track down the Death Worm and avenge the murder of this village, and to make sure that the Death Worm doesn't do to any other villages what they did to his. And the series that I used kind of like as a comparison was the 1970s TV series Kung Fu with David Carradine. For anyone who's like unfamiliar about that series, David Carradine plays as a Shaolin monk who ends up killing the nephew of the Chinese emperor because the nephew killed David Carradine's teacher in cold blood with a gun. He sees that as like a cowardly act. And so he kills him, and he flees to America, and he wanders the Wild West in search of his half-brother. And along the way, he comes across bandits and ruffians and gunslingers and just a bunch of people causing havoc. And he starts realizing that he can do some good. And he starts realizing that like his kung fu martial arts skills is actually pretty damn good against the gun-wielding cowboys of the West. That's the basic gist of the story. I would have borrowed a little bit of that in the sense that Mikey is traveling through this post-apocalyptic wasteland, because in The Last Ronin, the world is basically a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Cities have like crumbled. It's just a bunch of roaming gangs. It's kind of almost like Mad Max, only not every place is just, a desert wasteland. So Mikey goes around and he's traveling from place to place, trying to gather information and clues on where the Death Worm is at. And my thing would be that every issue, we could start with like a flashback. Maybe Mikey's like reading from Splinter's book that plays a huge part in The Last Ronin, the regular run. And maybe he's like looking through that. And as he's reading sections of his father's teachings, he has a flashback to when his father was imparting life lessons to him and his brothers. And those life lessons will set the tone for what that issue is going to be about. And so maybe at first we have Mikey, like in the flashback, he doesn't really get what his father is teaching him. Like his father imparts some kind of life lesson. Maybe his father gives him like a parable, and it's just not really resonating with Mikey. He just kind of finds it boring, or he's just not getting what his father's teaching him. And so we cut back to the present day where he's on this journey. Maybe he comes across a village, or maybe he comes across people in need of help, and he helps them. And that's what the issue will be about, him helping these different people as he's on this journey. And along the way, the life lesson that his father was telling him in the beginning, like I said, will play a part in the story, will play a part in the issue, and it will set the tone and the theme. And at the end of the issue, he'll realize what his father meant by the life lesson. He's like, oh, okay, now it's finally making sense. And so each issue, he grows a little bit stronger. Not just physically, but mentally as well. He starts realizing what his father was trying to teach him all along. And as he's going on this journey, maybe he's also sharing the life lessons to other people. Instead of just giving the book to Casey Marie Jones, and it's like, all right, here's what my father taught me. I'm going to teach you some of that, and you teach the next generation. Rather than just leaving it up to her to teach everything, maybe Mikey starts putting little seedlings to the people he comes across, the people he helps along the way. And maybe he confronts them, like, maybe he brings up what his father told him and he doesn't really get it. And maybe the response from the people he's helping can help him make sense of what his father was trying to teach him. Maybe he goes on these journeys. Let's say he comes across this town and the death worm is wreaking havoc, and he's able to prevent that town from being destroyed. So he wasn't able to save his own village, but he's able to save this village. And so he takes a break at the village, and he's trying to gather information about where the death worm is at. Because he's like, all right, I found some of his men here, but he himself is not here. And, he asks the people around. And maybe along the way, the people realize the trouble he's finding himself in. Maybe they realize that he's suffering from survivor's guilt, that he's suffering from depression and suicidal ideation. Maybe they realize, like, as he's saving the town, that he doesn't really seem to give a crap about his own life, that he's taking way too many risks when it comes to fighting, and that the only reason why he survived the fight would be through luck. I mean, it would be through skill, but there's also a lot of luck. There should have been a lot of chances where he should have died, but he didn't, because he just ended up getting lucky. And so they kind of impart their own wisdom. Not wisdom that he finds in his father's books, but wisdoms from other people. And they impart it to him. And it's stuff that makes him think. It makes him realize, you know what? Yeah, maybe you're a little bit right. And then he can actually start adding to his father's book. So rather than him just imparting what his father taught him, he's also jotting down in the book what other people have taught him, like what other lessons he's learned on this journey. And then now the book he gives to Casey Marie Jones is not just everything Splinter taught him, but stuff that he's learned himself from others. And this will basically be what this series would be. It'd be him going from place to place. He helps people here, he helps people there. He imparts wisdom to them. They impart some kind of life lesson to him, or they tell him something that he never really thought about before, but as he muse it over in his head, he's like, oh, maybe that kind of makes sense. Now I kind of figure out what my father meant when he said this, or when he wrote this in his book. And so every issue, he's getting a little bit stronger, not just physically, but also mentally and also emotionally. Everyone he helps is starting to build him up, is starting to build up his confidence, is starting to get him away from that path of suicidal thoughts. He's starting to realize, okay, everyone I love is dead, but that doesn't mean my story has to end here. That doesn't mean that I can't still do good. That doesn't mean that I can't share with the world what they've shared with me. And so he starts becoming a better person until at the very end, when he finally gets to confront the death worm, he's at his strongest. He started off at his lowest point, just a being battered Mikey who just wanted his life to end because there was nothing left for him. But along this journey, he starts waking up. He starts realizing that there's still good he can do. That just because his family's gone doesn't mean that he can't carry on their legacy. That he can't impart it to others. That he can't make life a little bit better. Because that's something his father always taught him. His father, at first they wanted to get revenge against the Foot Clan. But then their mission kind of switched to realizing that the Foot Clan was doing evil, and we have to protect the world. It's our job to stop this evil. And now that the Foot Clan is basically gone, that doesn't mean that there's still not evil out there. So he starts building himself up until when we finally get to that confrontation, he's strong again. He no longer is really suffering from suicidal ideation. He still has the survivor's guilt, but he's using that anger and that pain to make himself better, to strain himself, to push him forward as motivation to just keep on going. And when he finally comes across the death worm, he uses the skills and the wisdoms that he's learned along the journey, not just training, but also the life lessons, the teachings. And he uses that to finally beat and defeat the death worm. And now he's ready to go back to Manhattan, to go back to his home. He's strong enough now. He couldn't go back home because he couldn't face going back there, because that's where he pretty much lost everyone. That's where the destruction of his friends and family started. It was at his home city in Manhattan. And he just wasn't strong enough mentally or emotionally to go back there. But now he is. Now he's defeated the death worm. He's learned along the way. And he feels like, okay, now it's time for me to take that next step. Now it's time for me to push myself more, to push myself outside of my comfort zone, and to go back home and to face my fears and to finally complete my story. And then that's how the series will end. And then, that sets up for The Last Ronin. Anyways, that's what I would have done. I don't know, what do you think? Do you like that idea? Do you hate it? Are there some things that you would change? I would just like to hear your thoughts. Like, what would you do? But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. And like I said, I always enjoyed these pitches, especially now. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm actually a professional screenwriter. That's my actual job. It's what my main income is from, is screenwriting. I mostly do movies. Of course, with the whole writers strike and stuff like that, it kind of makes it a lot harder for me to work. So it's still nice though to be able to have some kind of outlet. So it's nice to just pitch these ideas. Obviously, I'm never going to do a Last Ronin series because I'm not a comic book writer, but also the fact that it's done. This is just me taking what was already there, and here's what I would have done instead. Here's my spin on it. And sometimes it's kind of fun to come up with my own ideas for how I would have told someone else's story. So this was nice. I might want to do more of these. It's just whenever inspiration hits. But I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later.